Welcome to this deep dive just for you. Today we're going deep into Vanessa Van Edwards' book, Cues, to really break down the secrets to charisma.
Oh, it's really interesting because Van Edwards sort of like demystifies charisma.
Okay.
A lot of people think it's like, this magical thing that you're just born with. But she actually presents it as a formula. She has this equation: warmth plus competence equals charisma.
I like that, like a recipe.
Yeah, it's like a recipe, It's
Yeah.
something that you can actually learn and adjust.
Mm. I've always sort of admired people who can just, light up a room, but I never really thought about it as something you could learn. But it makes sense if you think about it like a skill you can develop.
Right, exactly. And get this, Van Edwards says that 82% of our first impressions are based on those two elements, warmth and competence. It's like our brains are constantly sizing people up, deciding if they're trustworthy
Oh, yeah.
and capable.
Yeah.
Even Goldie Hawn, known for her warmth and charm, she realized she needed to dial up the competence perception when she launched her Mind Up program.
Oh, interesting.
Because she knew people needed to see her as more than just a bubbly actress
Right.
for the program to be taken seriously.
Wow, that's a great example.
Yeah.
It really shows how even someone like Goldie Hawn, who seems naturally charismatic,
Mm-hmm.
still strategically adjusts her approach.
Right.
So how do we find that sweet spot? How do we project both warmth and competence and really land in what Van Edwards calls the charisma zone?
Yeah, it's about adaptability.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, Jeff Bezos is a great example.
Okay.
He can turn up the competence in, like a business setting, but in more relaxed situations, he's known for his infectious laugh.
Uh-huh.
He's really mastered figuring out how to adjust his charisma to kind of fit the context.
So it's like having different charisma tools in our toolbox
Exactly.
and knowing which one to use depending on the situation.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah. So now let's actually dive into some of the specific cues that can make all the difference. And we'll start with body language. One that Van Edwards highlights is the subtle power of leaning in. Have you ever noticed yourself doing that when you're really engaged in a conversation?
Oh, totally. I think I do it unconsciously. But it's interesting to think about the effect it has on the other person,
Yeah.
It's like a nonverbal way of saying, I'm with you.
It actually subconsciously activates motivation in both the person leaning and the person being leaned towards.
Wow.
It's remarkable how these subtle movements can have such an impact.
Right.
And speaking of subtle, have you ever thought about the power of simply uncrossing your arms?
I mean, I know it's good to have, open body language,
Mm-hmm.
but is it really that significant?
It can be surprisingly impactful. Van Edwards mentions a test where a marketing expert simply uncrossed his arms in his website header photo, and just that one change led to a 5.4% increase in conversions,
Like serious?
just from uncrossing his arms.
A 5% increase just from uncrossing his arms. That's incredible.
People were more likely to sign up for his services just because he appeared more open and approachable.
I'm definitely going to be more conscious of my posture now.
It's a good reminder that these nonverbal cues can have a real impact, especially, in situations like meetings, presentations, even networking events.
Yeah.
Another powerful cue is what Van Edwards calls fronting. Imagine a basketball player, squaring up for a pass.
Okay.
That's fronting. You're turning your entire body towards someone, showing them respect, and giving them your full attention.
Yeah, I can see how that would make someone, feel really seen and heard. I've definitely felt a bit slighted, when someone only partially turns towards me.
Right.
It's like they're not fully present.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about using space strategically. We all have these invisible bubbles around us. Van Edwards calls them the intimate, personal, social, and public zones. Understanding these zones and knowing when it's appropriate to move closer or further away, that can make a big difference in how comfortable people feel around you.
Okay. I'm intrigued by these zones.
Yeah,
Can you give me some examples of how they work in practice?
sure. The intimate zone, that's reserved for people we're very close to, like, family and romantic partners.
Uh-huh.
Then you have the personal zone, that's for friends and colleagues. The social zone is for acquaintances and strangers we're interacting with. And then the public zone, that's for formal settings like presentations or speeches.
So it's about being respectful of people's personal space and knowing which zone is appropriate for the situation.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical distance, it's also about eye contact. Gaze is a powerful way to connect with people, but how we gaze matters. Have you ever heard of the reading the mind in the eyes test?
I haven't, but it sounds intriguing. What is that?
It's a test where you're shown pictures of people's eyes and asked to identify the emotion they're expressing.
Oh.
And, it really highlights how much information our eyes convey. Even without words, we can communicate empathy, understanding, even skepticism just through our gaze.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm starting to see how much is going on beneath the surface of our interactions.
It's a whole world of nonverbal communication. Now, let's shift gears and talk about some specific cues that really amp up the warmth factor.
Okay.
These are the gestures and expressions that make people feel comfortable, drawn to you. One that's subtle but effective is the head tilt.
Oh, the head tilt. I always thought that was more of a, flirting tactic.
It can definitely be used in flirting, but it also has a broader effect of making people appear more approachable and trustworthy. It's like a nonverbal way of saying, I'm open to you.
Hmm, that's interesting. I'm going to try to, incorporate more head tilts into my interactions.
Yeah.
What are some other warmth cues we should be aware of?
Well, there's the simple act of nodding. We do it naturally when we're listening, but we can be more intentional about it. Nodding encourages the other person to keep talking, builds empathy, and creates a sense of agreement.
Oh, nodding is so interesting, right? It seems like such a small thing, but it clearly has a big impact.
Yes.
But I guess it's important to use it ethically, right? We don't want to, manipulate people into thinking we agree with them when we don't.
You're absolutely right. Nodding is a powerful tool, so we need to be mindful of how and when we use it. It's not about faking agreement, but rather showing genuine interest and engagement.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of engagement, there's another warmth cue that can spark connection, the eyebrow raise.
The eyebrow raise. I do that all the time. I never thought of it as a charisma cue.
Well, a quick eyebrow raise shows interest and can subtly prompt the other person to share more.
Hmm.
It's like saying, I'm curious, tell me more.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's the power of a genuine smile.
Everyone loves a good smile.
Meh. But not all smiles are created equal. Van Edwards talks about savor smiles. Those genuine, slow-spreading smiles that light up your entire face.
Yeah.
They're the kind of smiles that trigger reciprocal warmth. They make people feel instantly connected to you.
Yeah. I can picture those smiles. It's like you can feel the warmth radiating from them.
Exactly. They're memorable. They make people feel good.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of feeling good, let's talk about touch. Now, this one needs to be approached carefully and respectfully. But a brief, appropriate touch, like a handshake or a pat on the shoulder, this can actually boost oxytocin, the hormone that promotes trust and bonding.
Yeah. Touch is so powerful, but it's definitely context dependent. You have to be mindful of people's boundaries, cultural norms, but when it's done right, it can create a real sense of connection.
Absolutely. And finally, there's mirroring. Have you ever noticed how you sometimes unconsciously mimic the body language or words of someone you're talking to?
Oh, all the time. I think it's like a natural way of trying to build rapport.
It is. And when it's done subtly, it can create a subconscious sense of liking and understanding. It's like saying, I'm on the same wavelength as you.
So mirroring can be a powerful tool for building connections, but I imagine it takes practice to do it naturally and not come across as creepy.
You're right. The key is to be subtle and authentic. It's about reflecting their energy, not mimicking their every move.
Okay, so we've covered some really powerful warmth cues.
Yes.
Now, let's delve into the other side of the charisma equation, competence.
Yes.
What are some ways we can project that aura of capability and expertise?
Well, one that's surprisingly effective is simply adjusting your posture. Think about those times when you're feeling really confident. You probably stand or sit a little taller with your shoulders rolled back.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift, but it makes a big difference in how you project yourself.
I've definitely noticed that my posture changes based on my mood.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling unsure of myself, I tend to hunch over. But when I'm feeling good, I naturally stand taller. It's like our bodies are reflecting our inner state.
And the amazing thing is it works both ways.
Yeah.
By consciously adjusting your posture to a more confident stance, you can actually boost your feelings of confidence. It's like a feedback loop.
Oh, okay. So posture is key.
Yes.
What are some other competence cues we should be aware of?
Well, there's the power of a confident gaze. Have you ever noticed how some people hold your gaze for a beat longer at the end of a sentence?
That makes me think of the famous Nixon-Kennedy debate,
Oh, yes.
where Nixon kept darting his eyes around while Kennedy held this steady gaze. And it's said that Kennedy's confident eye contact played a role in his victory.
It's a classic example. It shows how even small nonverbal cues can have a huge impact, especially in like high-stakes situations.
Yeah.
And speaking of nonverbal cues, let's talk about hand gestures. There's one in particular that conveys confidence and thoughtful consideration, the steeple.
The steeple. I think I know what you're talking about. It's when you press your fingertips together, right?
Exactly. It's a subtle gesture. But it can signal that you're in control, carefully considering what's being said. I see it all the time in like boardrooms negotiations.
Yeah.
It's a power move, even if it's done unconsciously.
The steeple. I'm going to have to add that to my repertoire. What about other hand gestures? I know some people are really expressive with their hands while others barely move them at all. Is there like a right or wrong way to use hand gestures?
Well, like most things with charisma, it's about finding the right balance. Van Edwards calls it using explanatory gestures.
Okay.
It's about using your hands to illustrate and emphasize your points, making your communication more engaging and understandable.
Yeah. I love that. It's like you're using your hands to kind of paint pictures in the air
Right.
that help people grasp your ideas more fully. I'm definitely someone who talks with my hands, so I'm glad to hear that it can be a good thing.
It can be incredibly effective. You know, think about like how a conductor leads an orchestra, right? Their movements bring the music to life.
Yeah.
It's the same with our words. And speaking of hands, there's another gesture that can subconsciously cue trust and honesty, the palm flash.
The palm flash, what is that exactly?
It's simply showing your open palms. It's a subtle gesture, but it can convey a sense of transparency and openness. Think about like those iconic images of Evita Peron, addressing crowds with her palms outstretched.
Yeah.
It's a powerful pose, both commanding and inviting at the same time.
That's a brilliant example. It shows how these, like, seemingly small gestures can have such a profound impact on how we're perceived.
Yeah.
Especially when we're, like, speaking to a group.
Exactly. And it all comes back to those two key elements of charisma, warmth and competence. By understanding these cues and using them strategically, we can enhance our communication, create more impactful interactions.
This has been so fascinating. It's like we're uncovering the secret language of charisma.
Yes.
Understanding how our bodies, our voices, even our words can be used to create connection and influence. But I'm also curious about, like, the flip side.
Yes.
What are some cues that we should definitely avoid, or at least be aware of when others are using them?
That's a great question. And it's an important one because some cues can send the wrong message, even if we're not aware of them.
Okay, I'm ready for the danger zone.
Yeah.
What are some cues that can sabotage our charisma?
Well, one that's a major red flag is distancing. It's when someone physically steps back or leans away from you, during a conversation. It can signal discomfort or disinterest.
I've definitely felt that when I'm talking to someone and they kind of take a step back.
Right.
It's like they're putting up this, like, physical barrier between you, not exactly conducive to, like, a warm connection.
It can be quite jarring. And then there are self-soothing behaviors. Things like, excessive self-touch, fidgeting, or playing with your hair. We often do these things when we're nervous or anxious.
Oh, those are so relatable, though. I know I fidget when I'm nervous. What's the problem with those types of behaviors?
Well, while they're often a natural response to anxiety, they can be distracting and make you appear less confident. It's like your body is sending mixed signals. Your words might be saying one thing, but your nervous habits are telling a different story.
So it's about finding ways to manage our anxiety so it doesn't manifest in these distracting ways.
Exactly. Now, another set of cues to watch out for are blocking behaviors.
Okay.
These are things like crossing your arms, covering your mouth, or shielding your eyes. They often signal defensiveness or closed-mindedness.
Blocking. I've definitely been guilty of crossing my arms when I'm, feeling uncomfortable or disagree with something. It's like an instinctive way of protecting ourselves.
It's a natural response, but it can create a wall between you and the other person. And then there's the shame touch, which is touching the neck or collarbone. It often indicates embarrassment or insecurity.
I've never heard of the shame touch, but now that you mention it, I can totally picture it. It's like people are subconsciously trying to, like, cover up their vulnerability.
It's fascinating how our bodies betray our inner emotions, even when we're trying to keep them hidden. And of course, decoding these cues and others can give us valuable insights into how they're truly feeling.
This is all so eye-opening. I'm already thinking about how I can apply these insights to my own interactions.
That's great to hear. And we're just getting started. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how our voices can either enhance or undermine our charisma.
Okay.
Get ready to unlock the power of your vocal presence.
All right. I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Okay, we covered a lot of ground with body language cues, but you mentioned there's more to projecting charisma than just how we stand and move.
Mm.
I'm really curious to learn about how our voices play into this.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The way we use our voice is a huge part of how others perceive us. Think about it. Even if you can't see someone, their voice can tell you if they're, confident, nervous, even bored.
Yeah, yeah.
It's incredible how much information we convey through our tone, pace, and volume.
It's so true. I've definitely had phone calls where I could just tell the person on the other end wasn't really paying attention,
Right.
even though they were saying all the right words. It's like their voice betrayed their true feelings.
Exactly. And just like with body language, we can learn to use our voices more strategically to project the image we want. One of the biggest charisma killers, for example, is something called nervous pitch.
Oh.
When we're anxious or stressed, our voices tend to get higher and squeakier.
Yeah.
It's a dead giveaway that we're feeling insecure.
Oh, nervous pitch. I know that one all too well. I can literally hear my voice go up an octave when I'm like giving a presentation or talking to someone I admire.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my vocal cords have a mind of their own. What can we do about that?
Well, awareness is the first step. Once you're aware of how your voice changes when you're nervous, you can start to practice techniques to manage that anxiety. Deep breathing exercises can help to calm your nerves and lower your pitch. Also, try speaking from your diaphragm rather than your throat. It'll give your voice a richer, more resonant quality.
Deep breathing and speaking from the diaphragm. Got it.
I'm making a note to practice those techniques. What are some other vocal patterns we should be aware of?
Well, there's another one that can undermine our credibility question inflection. It's when we use an upward inflection at the end of our statements, making them sound like questions even when we're trying to make a declarative point.
Oh, question inflection. I know exactly what you mean. It's like people are constantly seeking validation or approval rather than like stating their ideas with conviction. Do you have an example of what that sounds like?
Sure. Imagine someone saying, this project is going to be a huge success.
Okay. Hear that upward inflection at the end?
Yeah.
It makes the speaker sound unsure of themselves, even if they're actually quite confident.
So instead of saying this project is going to be a huge success, we should say this project is going to be a huge success, period.
Exactly. It's about owning your statements and projecting confidence through your vocal tone. And speaking of vocal tone, there's another one we should talk about, vocal fry.
Oh, vocal fry. I've heard a lot about that lately. It's that creaky, croaking sound that some
Right.
people have at the end of their sentences, right?
You got it. And while it's become, quite common, especially among young women,
Yeah.
studies show that vocal fry can make you sound less confident and less competent. It can also be distracting and make it harder for people to understand what you're saying.
So while it might be a trendy vocal pattern, it's probably best to avoid vocal fry if we want to project charisma.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to a vocal quality that can really boost your charisma, volume, dynamism. It's about varying your volume to keep people engaged and emphasize your key points.
Volume dynamism. I love that term. It's like using your voice as an instrument.
Yes.
Creating a symphony of sound that captures people's attention. I think about like some of the most charismatic speakers I've heard.
Right.
They're not afraid to, raise and lower their voices to create a sense of drama and excitement.
That's a great way to think about it. A monotone voice can be incredibly boring. But when you strategically modulate your volume, you create a more dynamic and compelling listening experience.
Okay, I'm making a note to pay more attention to my volume dynamism.
Mm-hmm.
What about pauses? Are those good or bad for charisma?
Pauses can be incredibly powerful when used strategically. They can replace those pesky ums and ahs and give you time to gather your thoughts.
Yeah.
A well-placed pause can also create a sense of anticipation and draw your listeners in.
I've never thought about pauses that way, but it makes so much sense. It's like giving your audience a moment to digest what you've just said and prepare for what's coming next.
Precisely. A pause can be just as impactful as a word, sometimes even more so.
I'm starting to realize that there's so much more to using our voices effectively than I ever imagined. It's like we have this whole instrument at our disposal, and we can learn to play it in a way that captivates and inspires others.
That's a wonderful way to put it. Now, before we move on to the visual elements of charisma, there's one more vocal cue I want to touch on, the power of hello.
The power of hello, that seems so simple.
It is simple, but it's also incredibly important. That initial greeting sets the tone for the entire interaction.
Yeah.
A confident, warm hello can make people feel instantly at ease and open to connecting with you.
I've definitely noticed how a warm greeting can make a big difference. It's like it sets the stage for a positive interaction.
Exactly. And it's something we can all practice. Be mindful of your mood when you're greeting someone. If you're feeling stressed or distracted, it will likely come across in your voice. Take a deep breath, smile if it feels genuine, and speak on the exhale. It will give your voice a more relaxed and confident quality.
Great tips. I'm going to start paying more attention to how I say hello. Now, I'm curious to learn about those visual elements you mentioned. We've talked about body language and vocal cues, but what about the visual aspects of charisma? Is it about like how we dress, our hairstyles?
It's about all of that and more. It's about understanding how imagery, colors, and even the way we present things visually can influence people's perceptions.
I'm intrigued. I never really thought about how our visual environment plays into charisma.
It's a powerful force. Think about how certain images can evoke strong emotions or associations. Van Edwards gives the example of laundry detergent. If you're exposed to images of the ocean and the moon,
Yeah.
you're more likely to think of Tide detergent. It's because they've strategically used those visuals in their branding to create a link in our minds.
Wait, really? Just seeing pictures of the ocean makes people think of Tide. That's wild.
It's a great example of how visuals can tap into our subconscious associations. And this principle applies to so much more than just advertising. Think about your office decor, your clothing choices, the colors you use in your presentations.
Yeah.
All of these elements contribute to your overall visual presence.
Okay, I'm seeing a whole new dimension to charisma now. It's not just about how we communicate verbally and non-verbally, it's also about the visual cues we send out into the world.
Exactly. And just like with other aspects of charisma, we can use these visual cues strategically to create the desired effect. One of the most powerful tools in our visual arsenal is color.
Color.
Oh.
I love thinking about color. It's so evocative. I'm definitely drawn to certain colors over others.
That's because different colors evoke different emotions and associations. Red, for example, is often associated with passion, energy, and excitement, while blue is linked to calmness, trustworthiness, and stability.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I've always found blue to be very calming and serene,
Yeah.
while red is more energizing.
It's fascinating how colors can have such a profound impact on our moods and perceptions. And when you understand the psychology of color, you can use it strategically to create the atmosphere you want.
Okay, I'm already thinking about how I can use color more intentionally in my wardrobe and even in my home decor.
Yeah.
What are some other visual strategies we can use to enhance our charisma?
Well, Van Edwards talks about the power of visual metaphors.
Okay.
It's about using symbolic imagery to convey meaning. She gives the example of Sugarfina, the high-end candy company.
I love Sugarfina. Their candy is amazing. What visual metaphor do they use?
They present their candy like fine jewelry or gourmet food. You're greeted by a personal salesperson who helps you select each piece. And the packaging is elegant and sophisticated.
Ah, I see. They're elevating the whole candy experience, making it feel luxurious and special.
Exactly. And it works brilliantly because it taps into people's neural associations. By presenting candy in this way, they're subconsciously linking it to ideas of luxury and indulgence,
Yeah.
which justifies the higher price point. That's so clever. It's like they're hacking our brains to create a perception of value.
It's a great example of how visual cues can shape our perception of a product, a brand, even a person. Think about how you present yourself, your clothing, your accessories, even your office decor. All of these elements contribute to your visual brand and influence how people perceive you.
Okay, this is all blowing my mind. I never realized how much power we have to shape people's perceptions through our visual choices.
It's a fascinating realm to explore. And the more you understand about these subtle visual cues, the more intentional you can be in crafting the image you want to project.
This has been so eye-opening. I'm already starting to see the world in a whole new light,
Right.
noticing all these visual cues that I never really paid attention to before.
That's the beauty of learning about charisma. It opens up a whole new level of awareness and understanding about how we communicate and connect with others. Yeah, I completely agree. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have a question. We've talked about how these cues can enhance our charisma and help us achieve our goals. But is it possible to be too charismatic? Can these techniques be used to, like, manipulate or deceive people?
That's a great question, and it's an important one to address. Van Edwards does caution against using these cues unethically.
Uh,
Authenticity is crucial. If you're not genuine, people will eventually see through it.
that makes sense. It's like any tool, it could be used for good or bad.
Yeah.
Charisma, when used ethically,
Right.
can be a powerful force for building relationships, inspiring others, and making a positive impact on the world.
I couldn't agree more. It's about using our knowledge of these cues to enhance our communication and create more positive and meaningful interactions.
This has been an amazing deep dive into the visual aspects of charisma. I'm excited to hear what other insights you have to share in the final part of our exploration. We've uncovered so much about charisma already, from body language cues to the power of our voices, and even the visual elements that influence perception. As we wrap up our deep dive into cues by Vanessa Van Edwards, I'm eager to kind of distill those key takeaways that our listener can put into practice immediately.
Absolutely. I think what's most remarkable about Van Edwards' approach is that she breaks charisma down into actionable steps.
Uh-huh.
It's not about being someone you're not. It's about refining the way you present yourself to the world.
It's like we've been given a toolkit,
Right.
and now we have the power to choose which tools to use in different situations.
Precisely.
It's empowering.
And one of the most powerful tools in that kit is awareness. Simply becoming more conscious of our body language, our vocal patterns, our word choices can make a world of difference.
Yeah. I've been catching myself leaning in more during conversations, and I've even started paying attention to my posture when I walk into a room. It's amazing how those small adjustments can make you feel more confident.
It's incredible how much our nonverbals influence not only how others perceive us, but also how we feel about ourselves. And remember, even small changes can have a big impact. You don't need to overhaul your entire personality.
Right.
Start by incorporating one or two new cues that resonate with you and see how they feel.
That's such a good point. It can feel overwhelming to try to implement everything at once.
Yeah.
What are some of the cues that you find most impactful, the ones that really pack a punch?
For me, the head tilt and the savor smile,
Uh-huh.
those were game changers. They're so simple, yet they instantly make you more approachable and likable. And on the competence side,
Okay.
I'd say mastering the confident gaze and using explanatory gestures
Yeah.
can really elevate your presence.
Those are great ones.
Yeah.
I'm also really fascinated by the concept of fronting, turning your body fully towards someone.
Yes.
It's such a powerful way to show respect and make them feel valued. It's something I'm going to be more mindful of in my interactions.
It's a subtle but profound shift. And as you experiment with these different cues, pay attention to how they make you feel. Confidence and charisma often come from stepping outside our comfort zones and trying new things.
I love that perspective. It's about embracing the journey of self-discovery
Yes.
and finding what works best for us. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder. We've explored how charisma can be a powerful tool for communication and influence.
Yes.
But I'm curious, where do you think the line is between using these techniques effectively and, well, maybe being a little too calculated?
That's an insightful question. I think authenticity is key. These techniques are most effective when they come from a place of genuine connection and a desire to communicate effectively. If you're using them to manipulate or deceive people, it will eventually backfire. People can sense when someone isn't being genuine.
That makes sense. It's about using these tools ethically
Absolutely.
and with good intentions.
Charisma, when used wisely, can be a force for good in the world. It can help us build stronger relationships, inspire others, and create positive change.
Well, that's a great point to end on. It's been such a pleasure diving into the world of charisma with you. And for our listener, remember, you have the power to enhance your presence and make a positive impact through the way you communicate and connect with others.